Passion projects should come from the heart. It should be an expression of your experiences. And today, we are going to discuss my most recent passion project, autophobia. Filmmaking can be a very lonely career, and throughout all the adversities that stood in my way, I've been able to gather enough wisdom to continue to forge a better path for myself every day. And autophobia represents the struggles that I've faced when tackling fear, doubt, and negativity. Not only will I share some PTS from the shoot itself, but I'll also dive deep into the process into making this passion project. So, welcome to the Applebox Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Lau, and we are going to talk autophobia, baby. Let's get into it. For this, I am by myself here today. This is a hectic schedule, adding in a podcast onto the weekly, as a weekly kind of thing. So, bear with me. I'm going to try to keep this as entertaining as humanly possible. I mean, it's cinematography, right? We're talking about filmmaking. There's really ultimately so many things you can talk about. I can go on for hours and hours and hours about cinematography, but, it's not necessarily everything people want to hear. So it's not the most entertaining thing in the world, especially if you don't know what I'm talking about. But in the filmmaking world, we all go through similar experiences, and, I'm going to get right into it because I'm just babbling on. But, so why autophobia? Well, I've always wanted to make something that I felt where I could be in control of, the creative control in what I do. And I think I've reached that stage of my career where I wanted to make more meaningful things, and I wanted to show the world what I'm capable of to an extent that, that allows me to show that. So in other words, these are self-funded commercials. So I don't have all the money in the world. So I'm not going to be able to sit there and put, plop down $50,000 or $100,000 on a commercial. Right. So I had to be really resourceful, and autophobia was done, in under 5 figures. And we were able to pull that off simply because, I've built years and years and years of reputation, trying to be a nice guy. I mean, you hear that a lot of times about Applebox podcasts, right? Try to be a nice guy, and that's being nice is going to bring you a long way. And, I've given a lot to my community in terms of, being charitable, in terms of my time and, even my technical expertise and releasing breakdowns of what I do. I don't really hide many secrets as to how I do things. And, a lot of that goes a long way with people when you build a repertoire with people as that guy who's just loves the game and loves doing this so-called sport of filmmaking. I guess you can call it that. And, for me to build up enough of a reputation to have people want to come out and actually want to help out. You connect that with a good cause and a passion of mental health, which is something I'll get into. It really starts to, accumulate, a community of people that you vibe with, that you work with, and people will be more willing to help out when you are nice, when you are, when you are respectful and you respect them. And so, I've always been a proponent of helping out, and, within the community, I love helping anybody at any level. If somebody is so much better than me, I don't care if I have to go in there and become a coffee boy. If I can learn from you, I will be there. People who are green or newer and don't have as much experience as me, I love bringing those people on set and just letting them experience it and see what it's like, and, hopefully answer some questions that they might have. And, this whole thing is all about building a community. And so Applebox Podcast was, built on that premise of connecting filmmakers and building community, and not, defeating that stigma that this is some kind of massive competition. And of course you can look at it from that perspective. I feel like you can take filmmaking, you can You can twist it any way that you want to. Whatever perspective you choose to look at it in tongue twister there. Whatever perspective you choose for this community and for this industry is going to be a perspective that you function at. And you're going to be right. And like, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. How you look at it is how you look at it. It's, I like to believe that if you come up with a more negative viewpoint, that you're probably, a little bit more defensive or a little bit more insecure about perhaps something that might have happened to you, experiences that might have happened to you, but not to everyone else. And, for people who've only had great experiences, you're going to think great things. But at the end of the day, it's all of it, like all of it's possible. You're going to have great times. You're going to have shitty times. And your perspective is going to skew how you operate. And I think it's important for you to always try to find a way to progress your perspective, meaning open up. So if if you're really negative and because you've gone through nothing but negative experiences, I think it's very important for you to, find ways to find more positive experiences because they're out there. They exist. Regardless of what you think, they exist. There's good people out there in this industry. But it's also, when you look at it from a good perspective, to always be prepared and understand that there is a shitty part of this industry and there are some shitty people. And, I'm going on a whole rant about the philosophy of, the mindset and the culture of how to approach this industry. But, autophobia was a true test of where I wanted to see where I stood, and just in the realm and in the tier of where I stand as a cinematographer, as a filmmaker, right? Not just cinematographer, because I produced and directed this thing as well, but like, where do I sit in the filmmaking world, right? Like, in a lot of ways, it was like, who can I get out? Who respects me enough to want to help me? And I don't see that like, oh, it's a test, like I'm testing you, or I'm looking at like, do you like me? Like, no, not that at all. It's just a true evaluation of where I stand. Like, there's going to be people who I could ask and they're going to say no, right? Maybe they don't like my work. Maybe they don't like me. Maybe they, and at least it's good for me to know that. It's not to sit there and say, okay, I'm going to, I'm going to hit back with anyone who doesn't like me, but all the people who helped out were either volunteers of people I asked, or they're people who asked me to want to be involved in the project. And that's the I guess the starting premise of how autophobia started was, I want to make something that I can be proud of, that I can say, yeah, I will always have confines in terms of, restrictions in terms of budget, in terms of time, in terms of everything. But you're always going to have that no matter what level. What can I make with what I have? And I always try to, find the most resourceful way to get the results that I want. And so in this case, knowing that if I can create a still, or just create a project where it is still and it is not full of camera movement and all that kind of stuff. I'm not bashing that, obviously, but I want to truly test what I could do if a camera just stood on a tripod. And so that was the first, I guess you can say the first artistic choice when it came to this commercial series, was everything needed to be on a tripod. And that was the first challenge that I gave myself. And I really wanted to play with colors, and I really wanted to play with tonality, and I wanted to play with composition, and I really wanted to play with character of the lens. And so, I tried to attack all those things. And so when we started, me and Anthony started this idea in a car ride. And it was just one of those things where, what if we just, the original vision was, what if we just made commercials based off of a nonprofit, organizations or nonprofit industry, a mental health industry. If these commercials were just shot in one shot, originally, it was supposed to just be like 10 seconds of just one shot. And the stillness and the silence of that, how can we tell a story in one shot? I think that proved to be a lot more difficult than than we initially imagined, because it's just so many factors that go into just one shot. And can it make sense? And so, eventually evolved to the point where, there's more than one shot, but we try to keep it as short as possible. Now they're about 40 seconds. And, in that case, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about, how can I tell a story in a shorter period of time? in that fashion. And can I one day make that one shot? It's essentially a failure from my perspective in terms of me not being able to hit that initial vision. But at the same time, it's like, I'm proud of what came out of it, but it wasn't initially what I wanted it to be. But, these are things that you don't know. Like people are not going to know this unless I spit it out like I just did and spilled the beans on the podcast. Also, initially, had this idea that the color was going to be very monochromatic and it was going to be pastel kind of tonality with almost like a slightly filmic look, but like, less contrast. And I was going to play it off kind of as, something a little bit more dull because I really wanted the imagery to feel what the character felt like. And the reason why I strayed away from that as I was prepping for it was because this is a short ad. And I had to tell myself, like, listen, it's a short ad. It's the same reason why I couldn't do the one shot was you got to make it interesting because people are going to have a 5-second attention span. So can you create something that captivates everybody to want to sit through the entire 15 seconds? And that 5-second attention span will quickly turn into 1 second if it's dull, if it's boring, if it's not exciting to look at. And so I kind of strayed away from that. And so, as much as I love the idea and what it meant to the story, this is not a narrative. I think if you did this in a narrative sense or even a short film sense or even like a 2-3 minute commercial sense, you could probably get away with that, right? Because you can play off of that. That could just be one of the scenes and you can kind of like create a whole character development behind it. And your character can build and you can create a story and things can happen that the tonality begins to make sense. But in a short ad, not really. It's almost like you have to find things that are a little bit more interesting to look at. And so, I tried looking for inspiration in terms of like, how can I inspire the tonality that went into this? And you're going to notice it a lot in, especially part 1, that a lot of the inspiration comes from the Joker. And I just love the way that the Joker is shot. It's absolutely beautiful. And, the colors and the green and the orange and just the way it felt. And so, I inspired off of that. And that's what I ended up, going towards because the Joker is very much to do with mental health, right? In terms of his mental health, right? And so that's what kind of inspired me to go down that direction, to make it more interesting, to make it a little bit more easy to look at. And so that's why that window is the way it is and why I decided to go hazier and more streaky and more of a punchy look in the whole thing. But I wanted to keep it dark. And that was the most important thing. Like there has to be something that follows the original vision. And so, aside from the story and the setting itself, but I want to really, really like still tell the story through in some way or another through the cinematography in a sense that doesn't follow tradition. And what I mean by tradition is in a sense like, you follow the same lighting rules, except you just, go darker than normal. Like I really want to play with what the area was giving me. Like not every character at all times, especially when we're really playing into a character's psyche here, is not going to be perfect. They're not going to be placed in the perfect lighting every single time. They're not going to have that perfectly soft key wrap every single time. And so like on the close up, it hit me nice. It really hit me hard when I saw that close up because that's what I wanted. And I understand that like, people can get lost in the idea that, oh, there's like raccoon eyes or you can wrap this and you can wrap that. You should have did this. You should have did that. Maybe a little push on this. And, I could tell you right now, just from experience and from all experienced DPs that I've ever spoken to, I could tell you right now, like that's the very first way to tell somebody that you are not an experienced DP is to like start talking about like the rules of lighting and how to achieve those rules. I'm not trying to call anyone out or anything like that, but it's true. Like that's a real DP or not sure a real DP, but I should say experienced DPs. Sorry, I don't know if people take that the wrong way, but experienced DPs know that you light to the story and you light with context. And when you break something down, it's not really looking to be like, I should have did this or I should have did that, or I would have did this or I would have did that, but more so, why did they do that? And asking that question, you know? And so the Darrell's close up, you know, for me, it was all about keeping that dark tone and keep, like, you can look at the IRE scale. It was really low. Like it was hitting the very bottoms there, but that's what I wanted. You know, I wanted that raccoon. I wanted that sinister look, you know, and I knew that all I needed was just a ping in the eye and just to give it a little bit more life. And I almost didn't even add the ping in the eye. You know, I was going to go very artsy fartsy and go extreme and be like, well, there is, you know, they say what the ping in the eye is the, you know, the kind of window into the character's soul. Well, in this case, I want the character to feel soulless. And so like part of me almost didn't want to do that. But again, it's that compromise between like telling the story and getting too artsy fartsy to the point where, like, let's just be honest, a lot of people won't give a fuck and they don't care, right? So you're kind of just doing it for you. Versus like what is also fun and actually interesting to watch. And so, you know, finding that compromise and trying to find that middle ground, letting go of your ego was, you know, part of the process of making this whole thing. And right now I'm only talking about part one, but you know, overall it's the same kind of philosophy that I go through with every single one of the autophobias. You know, it's kind of how you know, what I liked about it was the fact that like it challenged me in that sense. Like usually client work, I get a deck, you know, maybe I'll get a mood board, maybe I'll get, you know, a whole pitch deck on concepts and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes even shot lists, you know, and I'll look at it and I'll be like, okay, like I kind of already know what I got to do to make this look good, you know, and ultimately that's what you're just doing is you're just making it look good. Right. And a lot of times, and a lot of, especially the shittier gigs, like you don't have a director and there is no direction. You're essentially kind of the director, you know, even if you're not the editor and you're just DPing, like there's no director sometimes, or the director doesn't know what they're doing, or the director is the producer and they don't know what they're doing. Right. And it's like, your only job really is to make it look good. Whereas autophobia was different because there's intention, there's purpose behind it. And I like that challenge of finding a way to not go too far with my ego in terms of like, how can I make this the most artsy thing in the world, the most meaningful thing in the world, and balance that between making it look good and having that element in it as well. Because reality is, and this is a whole topic on its own, nobody gives a fuck about your intentions. But it just because people don't see it or people aren't intentionally asking about it doesn't mean it doesn't have an effect on the overall picture. And so, you know, it's up to you to kind of find a way to continue to stay true to your style of image and your vision and executing on that, regardless of the fact that nobody gives a fuck about your intention, because that's what's going to drive that little sense of uniqueness to your image. But at the same time, not getting too carried away with it and, you know, making sure that you're able to still tell your story. You know, DPing and directing this whole thing, I think was a challenge in the sense that like for the first time, I felt like I had to really think about the story with all the like knowledge that I know and all the accumulated wisdom that I've gathered in the years of doing this. Like it almost made it more difficult because now I'm aware of all the things that are expected of myself as a director and as a DP. And so, you know, story elements and how things piece together and how to make things make sense. At the same time, all the DP stuff in terms of what are the levels, what is the balance in the image that you want to make? What's the color contrast that you want to go with? Is there color contrast? What's the tonality? What's the lensing and the camera body and the sensor that you want to use? And at the same time, performances, right? And there's so many things that like go into it that like it's easy to get lost in it. It's not like I had a ton of time, you know, prepping for all of these things. I believe I only really had about 3 weeks to prep all three of them. and at the same time managing the logistics and the casting and everything. Like, just the whole process overall was just, there was a lot going into it. Um, and honestly, it was fun. To me, this is a challenge that I enjoy. Like, this is the stuff that gets me excited. Like, I could have, and I just spoke to Nick Pilecki on the phone about this. Like, I could have 1 hour of sleep, and if I go to autophobia shoot, a autophobia type of shoot where I actually really, really want to do it, I could have a 12-hour jolt of energy, like I slept all night. But I can go on a 1 hour off a 1 hour sleep onto, or I can get an 8 hour sleep onto a shoot that I really don't give a second fuck about, and it'll feel like the longest day in the world. I'll be a zombie. I will hate it. Like, there's something about the filmmaking challenge that really drove me in this series, that I really, really, really want to get the best of everything that I could, and overcome a lot of the challenges. And there were challenges. I'll say, day one was probably the easiest shoot day. It went the smoothest, I'd say. Um, I can't pinpoint exactly why, because that one had 5 hours and day two had 5 hours as well. And day three, I'll get into that. But day one had 5 hours shoot on location. That's 5 hour, meaning you have to load in, shoot, or load in, set up, shoot, breakdown, offload, out of location in 5 hours. And we got it all done pretty fast. Like, I think we were done an hour early. So going into day two, I figured, okay, yeah, like, we got it done an hour early on the first one. Day two should be, just as just as easy, right? I had it all planned out. I did a scout on all of the locations, but day two was a scout that I fucked up, and it was the one scout that I rushed, and I don't know why, but I was not feeling it that day. Something was wrong with me that day, where my mind was racing too fast. I was rushing myself to get out of there. I felt like I was being watched, and I didn't like that. And it just felt like I just was not on my top of my game. And when I went into location on day two, I noticed so many things that I was just like, that was there. Like, I didn't know this room was here. I didn't know that this side looked like this. And the whole thing switched. And the moment that Anthony was the one to point it out, said, hey, what if we shoot this way? And I was sitting there like, why didn't I notice that in the scout? And when I noticed that, it was so much better than the way that we were originally supposed to shoot, because there's so much depth and there's so much more interest. And I was like, I can't go back. I have to do this way. So, we flipped the game plan on the day of, and there's just a lot of things that were going on that just weren't working out. Like, the lights weren't behaving the way I wanted them to behave, in a sense that, like, we had plans for effects that just didn't work. We tried to make do with it. On-screen monitor was not de-squeezing my footage, and there was just so many little things that it was just like, man, I can't get this right. And, when you switch the game plan like that, I literally went from like, let's just bring these extra lights just in case we need them, that turned into like, I need more lights, or that you ended up using each and every one of them. And so it just, it was a disaster to say the least. But we got it done, and we got it done on time. And that day was a winter storm. So it was just, going home was 2 hours, and, everyone that came out for that, like, big kudos and appreciation for that, because that was one of the worst winter storms. I think it was the worst winter storm of the year. So, or of this winter. So, yeah, there's a lot of factors that were playing into that, but, day three, now this is where the day three was the most interesting, because day three, the location scout that we went through really started to make me nervous. And I remember, leading up to this shoot, and I was constantly like telling Anthony, like, yo, like, I'm really I'm anxious about this shoot. When we booked the location about a week out. I couldn't be exact, but somewhere around there. And the reference photos that were on the site looked great. Like, there was pracs, there was set deck somewhere, places, and then the main thing was the back window. And so the back window was clear in the shoot in the photos. And then we went for location scout, which was only days before the shoot, so it was too late. We had to do it. We went to location scout. All the cracks were gone. Most of the set deck that were in the photos were gone, and the windows were blacked out. So it was like a giant black ND just covering the entire windows. And because we were shooting this at night, it made it even worse. And I figured, okay, well, is there street lights at least outside? Nope, there were no street lights outside. And you can notice that it's evident in the shot that there was no streetlights outside. I figured, okay, well, at least there'll be bokeh outside, right? Nothing. And so like, I was just like, man, like, I don't know how we're going to light this. I can't swap to the other side. It just didn't look good. And so we ran into a lot of challenges with that. Or even like the roof rig, like, weren't sure if we can do it. And if we couldn't shoot from up over top, like, well, I don't know how we're going to shoot this. I don't know how we're going to light this. So there was a lot of anxiety going in. And when we got there, it was like, we had 3.5 hours. 3.5 hours is nothing. Absolutely nothing. And so my backup plan, and ended up working out, was to get as many insert shots as possible. Now, autophobia, this is why in part 1 and part 2, you don't see a lot of inserts, because it's not supposed to be full of inserts. But in this case, it worked out. You know, it was supposed to be kind of mundane and just tripod boring, quote unquote. And I don't know, maybe you do find it boring. I don't know. But inserts were not part of the game plan. And so, you know, we got in there. I'm like, game plan, get inserts, because at least inserts can fill in the time, right? And so we got a lot of props. Zara was a set deck in this one. And we just got props that like, all right, this will make a cool insert, and this will make a cool insert. And we just messed with it. And then I added in the cell phone as well. That was literally not supposed to be part of it. And I was like, I got to make this thing a little bit more exciting. But even like the inserts in terms of the close up of the eye, like that was not in the shot list. Initially, it was supposed to just be a medium shot of him, but I thought the eye shot was way better, so I ended up using that instead. And so, you know, like these backup plans, they happen, and that day, like we get in there, we're you know, last minute, we're like, me and Anthony we're like, holy shit, like we probably don't want to screw up their floors, do we? So we got to go out and we got to get mats now. We got to get things to, you know, to spread along the floor so we don't screw up the floors. And there's a lot of little things like that we're like, oh, we got to think about these little things. And we get in 3.5 hours on the clock starts ticking. We get in at 5:30, and I don't believe we didn't start shooting until about 8 o'clock, which was to me just absolutely like, I was nervous. I was like, oh my God, we are not going to make this. Like, we're not even gonna get a shot off. Are you kidding me? Like 8 o'clock, we haven't even got one shot yet. And, you know, I went into to the landlord and I said, hey man, I'll know by like 8:30 if I need another hour. Is that okay? And he said, yeah, sure. Just going to cost you what it costs on the website. And that's about like $400. So I really didn't want to do that. But believe it or not, somehow we managed to make it. Like we got our last shot off at 8:45. So it took 45 minutes to shoot the whole thing. And a lot of that had to do with, you know, the prep being ready. Like me and Jason throughout the whole setup was really prepping our shots and our angles, because a lot of things were added in last second, vis-a-vis the inserts. And so, you know, we were ready. It was the most efficient way to shoot it. And we were constantly planning. And, you know, I understood the lenses better. Now it's the third time I used them. The Kawas are full of character, right? So I understood them. And also Frank being the talent in this, like he was nervous, right? And so he's not an actor. Nobody in any three of these autophobias are real actors. They're all people that I just know. So they're not actors. So, you know, Frank was super nervous. And I noticed that when he sat down, he was a wreck. And I was like, this is perfect. Roll it. And I knew like, this is it. Because when I talked to all the actors, I said the same thing to all of them on the phone, because I knew I wouldn't have that much time to direct them on set. Is I told them, I don't want you to act a certain way, because no, you guys are not actors. I want you to be you. So if you're nervous, let's play into that. It's okay to be nervous. Just be nervous, right? We're going to get something out of that. And, I want whatever it takes. Like, doesn't matter if you need me to kick everyone off set. And I did that in part two. And if you need everyone, all eyes off of you, and you need them to kick them off set, I will. I need you to get into that space of what autophobia represents. And I want you to do it as you. I don't want you to do it like, someone who's, feeling lonely would do this, or they would do that, or they would cry, or they would do this. And then you try to do those things and you try to emulate those things. And to me, that was like, that's a big no-no. That's not what I want you to do. If you cry, you cry. I tell them all the time. If you cry, you cry. Fine. But if you don't, you don't. I just want you to be you. And so when you see Darrell Jimmy legging at the end there, that was natural. That was just him. That was me hitting the record button, seeing him do that. We weren't even rolling. Like, I never called roll. I didn't call action. I didn't do any of that. Like, I just hit record because he was doing it naturally. Just him being in the moment. And that's a big credit I have to give to all the talents in this whole thing, is they really pulled through, and they really embodied what I talked about and talked to them about. And they pull it off, man. And then, like, you look at Frank, like, he was absolute wreck, right? He was an absolute wreck going in. He was so nervous. I could see it in his eyes. I know Frank, and he was nervous. And I just see him just being there, just being nervous. Like, this is it. Like, this is the body language we want. Tim is not an actor at all. In fact, he's a videographer, right? So Tim himself, even, like, having to say, look, what do you need, right? And he came down. He was game, and yeah, all three of them just absolutely killed it. And so, worrying about acting and my ability just to direct them all comes from just, my acting background. For those of you who don't know, yes, I have an acting background, and understanding what they go through. And so, there wasn't a lot of time spent on the performances. There wasn't a lot of time for me to do that. And so, like, this is all part of the planning, right? Like, in the beginning, just finding ways to, like, okay, what is something that I can direct actors in that isn't too complicated? Well, these guys, they're in one spot. Most of them are sitting, one of them standing, and they're not moving. So that helps me, right? And those are decisions you have to make when it comes to making ideas. Of course, we can make an idea about somebody who's trekking through an entire, mall, and then ends up outside and gets into a car and then drives off. And then now you have this whole complicated setup where you got to get steady cams, you got to get, car rigs, you got to do all types of coverage, and it just becomes so much more complicated. Now I'm thinking about the performance in terms of the pace, how you're moving, what kind of actions do you have while you're doing this, and like, these are all things that you have to find a way to compromise, and you have to find a way to say what's realistic, right, from the very get-go. And it helps you learn, just going through all these things. It helps you learn what's possible, and helps you also value what everyone else's great job is and what they do, right? Like, in part 3, I wouldn't have gotten on the time if it wasn't for the team moving so damn fast. Anything I needed, there's somebody there to do it. And, like, that's what you want. Like, have yourself a good team, and you have a good team, and, like, a lot of things are very possible. Like, they make things possible. And so, yeah, that's, the overall gist of autophobia, and the thinking and the process that went behind it. I'm sure there's a lot more. I just really haven't gone into it, but, I guess, I really want to talk about the topic, and this is something I'm very passionate about. Not a lot of people know my story, and ultimately I don't blame them, because a lot of times I don't share a lot of it, right? Like, might see tidbits here and there. My episode might briefly go through it a little bit in the first episode of Applebox Podcast, or the second one, whatever. I might have shared it every now and then, but this topic is big to me because of what I had to overcome to get to where I am today. I'm not supposed to be where I am today. Given, if you were to put my life on paper from when I was a kid, and you were to say, Danny was given this, 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 and this, these are the cards that he was dealt, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that in a realistic way, meaning you know, I never had connections growing up in this, and I'll try to brief it as fast as possible, but like I was a kid who was a major introvert. Like I don't think I made my first friend till grade school. I was extremely quiet when I was in kindergarten. I mean, like extremely, meaning like I didn't talk to anybody. Um, and that ultimately led to really bad grades, obviously, because I didn't participate, right? And I think I maybe had only one friend that continually tried to talk to me, but I didn't talk to anybody. And when I got into grade school, that's how I ultimately became an introvert. Like I didn't really know how to make friends, right? So I never really grew up with friends, so I didn't really have people skills. I didn't have social skills. I didn't have the type of support and from my world and the people around me. Family, friends, all that kind of stuff. Like nobody sat there and said I was special, right? No, nobody sat there and ever told me that I would be something bigger than a UPS worker or whatever. I say UPS worker because I worked in UPS, right? And so it wasn't like I went into high school and I was like, I'm gonna be a filmmaker, and I didn't have the balls to do that because I didn't know that that was possible. I didn't even know that something like that was something you can do. And so I met my first friend in high school, and well, actually it was end of grade school, but we went to high school together. This was like grade 8. Then we moved on to high school, and he wanted to be a director and he wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to be an actor. And so we started writing scripts, doing short films and all that kind of stuff. And that it just ended horribly. Um, and it was about 7 years into my college years, right? I went to college for acting. And you would think, okay, you went to acting school, you did short films, you might have some connections there. I had none. I was loyal to a fault in a sense that like I couldn't do anything without that friend. And so that pretty much meant I didn't do anything and I didn't meet anybody, and I only knew him. And so like, I was stuck in that rut for a while. And same thing with college. Like I didn't meet anybody, because I had like one or two good friends and that was it from there. And, um, that's ultimately my fault. And at the end of the day, like, it continued to trend down that road that I was never going to meet somebody and I was never going to be able to make it in this business because everyone says, and it's true, networking is probably 90% of your, your career in terms of finding success in your career. And I don't know anybody, right? So I quit. And when I quit, I went into regular jobs, and that's when I ended up working warehouse work, Canadian Tire, UPS, retail, whatever. Like I ended up working regular jobs for about 10 years. Right. And so, yeah, that didn't, ended up being the life I wanted. So I came back out thinking, man, I have nothing. I don't have money. I don't have a place. I have nothing. Like I don't have any connections. I knew I wanted to get back into this. And when I finally started the videography, journey, things started to change a little bit. But, fast forward, I get to the point where, I'm making money now in videography and producing things for broadcast. And then the pandemic happened, and it was almost like a big joke of like, wow, like I finally found success. And then, it all cuts away from something that is completely out of my control. And at that point I had the decision, do I quit or do I keep on going? And do I keep finding something new that I want to do? And I kind of found an in between where I was like, you know what? I really enjoy lighting. I really enjoy creating good imagery. So I wanted to get into cinematography. And going into pandemic, once again, like all my connections were international. None of them were into commercials or anything. They're all TV people. It's a different world. I didn't know anybody. And I had to build myself from the ground up. And that's what's kind of spawned Apple Box Podcast eventually. Because that's what I meant by wanting to connect people, because, I didn't know how to get to know people, and I was almost scared to, because that's how I grew up. Right. And so seeing people talk, and now, the world of podcasting is big now, but like seeing people talk and just realizing that everyone's just human. Everyone just wants to help each other. I mean, at least some people do. And that helped me realize that like it's not as bad as you think. You just got to give people a chance to show them who they are. And once I realized that, I started to see a big change and a leap in the people I met, and grew my network into what it is today. And, you know, it takes time to do that, but it's, you just really got to be, like I said in the beginning, like you got to be a nice person, man. Respect people, be nice, and give people a chance to be nice back, and open yourself up to this world and understand that you are part of it, and know that you belong. You just got to believe that. And if you do, like, things will open up. And you know, back to the mental health process of the whole thing, like the constant resets and the constant disappointments really put a hamper on my everyday psyche, and it was really difficult. And with everything going on, I couldn't tell you how many times I thought I wasn't good enough. I couldn't tell you how many times I thought there's no way I'm going to make it. There's no way that I can be like so and so, or there's no way I can make imagery at this level, or I'm just not good enough. I couldn't tell you how many times I sat there and I wanted to quit. But I knew that if I quit, I had nothing. And this is all I have. And my back was against the wall. And that was, I almost had no choice but to keep going. And that's why when I say keep going, I mean it. Like, it matters, man. Like, you're going to go through hard times, but you're also going to go through good. And if you believe that life is balanced, you're going to go through both. And it all ties back to, you know, what I said about your perspective. Almost, you know, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter in a sense. It's just, if it's negative, find some good. If it's good, just be ready for the negative. And like, you have to really play that game of balance. And, you know, for the longest time, I was searching for the positive. I had nothing but negative, you know, things to think about, and negative perspectives to embody. And I, when you watch your whole life collapse in front of your eyes, a new version of you is born. It's up to you to decide what that new version is. And I had to decide. And when I mean your whole life crashes, I'm not talking like, oh, you know, like you feel lonely because you can't find a girlfriend, or, you know, stuff like that. No, I'm talking like my whole career crashed, man. The girl that I was supposed to marry, that I've dated and lived with for almost 6 years, left me. One of my closest friend passed away. Another friend commits suicide. Family members are starting to pass away as we get older. You know, seeing my mom break down was not easy. A whole heap of shit that all happened at the same time, man. You know, and all that while you're feeling like you don't feel like you're good enough, and that you got no support in this industry. I had no friends. I had to look around. Like, I don't know anyone in here. So there's no one there to tell me that I can do it except for myself. I lived through the fear and the silence. And I lived through that anxiety of feeling like I'm just going to end up being alone, that maybe I'm meant to be alone. And all this happened at the age of 34, 35, man. And it's not like I'm young. It's not like I say, oh, I got time. it was an empty time in my life, man. And when you go through that suffering, it's like that silence is it's it's so loud. It's not fun to look at, and it's not a part of you that you want to share. It's hard for people to understand because you have no words. That's why it's silent. You know what I mean? It's that is it could it is quite possibly the most indescribable moment. I remember I was sitting in a car after I had that breakup with my ex, and everything happened, and it all happened back to back to back to back to back, like literally what felt like probably only 2 weeks. It all happened, um, and I, for the first time, I sat there and I said to myself, I am overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. But that birthed the new version of me because the Danny that I knew all the way up until that moment died that day. And a new Danny had to be born. And I had to tell myself, it can either be the one that feels sorry for yourself and maybe you go on, you go get another job as a videographer or whatever, or do you try to do what feels impossible, which is be the greatest cinematographer or filmmaker or whatever it is you're going to end up being that you can possibly be. And, my heart sits with cinematography, but as I get to understand this industry, I also see that, you know, I'm good at other things as well. I feel like I could be a good director. I feel like I'm a decent enough producer and, but cinematography is where my heart stands. And I got to go after it. It's going to feel impossible. It's going to be hard. And it's easy when you look at like social media and you see how good everybody's doing. And that's something that I don't want people to have a misconception of me of like they see my stuff and they think I'm doing great. Like, yes, I'm proud of those moments. I'm proud of some of the stuff that I do, and I'm happy that people appreciate it. And I'm proud of it myself, but I'm not perfect, man. And like, I go through shit too, man. I go through doubts. I go through fears, man. I just had to birth a new Danny that was stronger and that was more resilient and much more purposeful. And so, my mindset's just a little different from most people because it was birthed through the fires of rock bottom, of hell. And I've been burned already. And like I felt that I never want to feel it again, you know? But most of all, I'm not scared of it because I know what it's like now. And so like, if I go there again, I know I can get out. And so when it comes to hard times, like I'm just more resilient. It's easier for me to push through it. I don't spend a lot of time reminiscing about it, like I'm sharing it now. And yeah, I got a little choked up when I talked about it a little bit, but that's because, that's something I'll never forget. It's a scar that lived with me for life, but I'm not going to spend time trying to erase the past. It's part of me. It's a reason why I'm able to be strong today. So yeah, maybe I seem a little bit more composed or something. I don't know. Some people, I don't know. I'm just assuming, but some people might see me as, oh, you're so whiny or whatever. I don't know what people think. It doesn't fucking matter to me. At the end of the day, like the reason why, you know, I don't come off like I'm struggling online is because of just my ability to keep grinding and realize that a lot of the shit that happens to you doesn't fucking matter. Just move on. There's another chance. There's another opportunity. Autophobia is not the last thing I'm going to make, right? There'll be more. And my goal is to keep making this for the rest of my life and to make as many autophobia type of things where I really get to be involved and I really want to do it, to make those as much as possible, more than not doing it. And that's just the game. That's the game I'm playing. That's it. And I realize I'm going to have to go through some shit gigs to get there. Every now and then I'm going to have to do some shit gigs. That's just how it is. But to sit there and whine about shit gigs, just, I mean, if I'm doing it all the time and that's all I'm doing, then yeah, obviously I'm going to end up whining about it. But if you realize that it's just part of the game, that it's what it takes and what it costs to do the other stuff, then you'll realize, you know what? Let's just get through it. Let's do it. Let's do it. How can I pull any kind of value away from those shit gigs and learn something from it? And just make the best out of every situation, man. And just keep fucking creating. Fuck all the doubts and the haters, man. Like, you're going to get it no matter what. Doesn't matter what level you sit at. You think about your favorite filmmaker, whether it's a cinematographer, director, or whatever, or actor, your favorite filmmaker. There's people out there who hate them. There's people out there that judge them. There's people out there that think they're better than them. No matter what level you reach, even your idols get criticized. Even your idols get judged. And you have to realize that you are just going to have to be you. And that's it. If you try to be somebody else, you're going to end up one day getting called out. I truly believe that even though it doesn't necessarily take a skill to get to a high place in this industry, I think, networking is probably going to get you there alone. That one day you're going to be found out. I just truly believe that. And perhaps people disagree with me. I just truly believe that you will be found out. If you suck, but you just ended up getting somewhere because of your networking abilities, I believe you will be found out. And the time you get found out is going to be devastating, because you could do 99% of your gigs, 99% of your gigs. You could have faked it till you made it. You could fake it the entire time, but that 1% and that one time that you get caught could be absolute devastation to your career. It could ruin your reputation. And to me, I just don't want to take that risk. I don't care that it's only that 1%. That 1%, I believe, will catch up to everybody at one point. But I believe if you come prepared to be consistent for the rest of your life, and actually study the game, study the craft, study the art, study the business, study everything, just be involved and be passionate and care, that you'll never, then that when that 1% comes and that time comes, you'll know how to combat that. You'll know how to fix it. You know how to get through it. But I believe if you just suck and you actually don't know what you're doing and you faked it this whole time, then it's going to catch up to you. I don't know how I got into that rant, but again, in the world of filmmaking, you have to make things that you love, and then you're going to make things that are shit. So it all circles back around to that, right? And it doesn't matter if you're making something that's good or you're making something that's shit. If you're true to yourself, if you're learning, if you're trying to grab the best that you can from it, if you actually evolve and progress into somebody who actually knows what they're doing, you're going to be fine. You just got to keep going. And yeah, this was supposed to be about autophobia, but led into a whole emotional rant. But that's what it is, right? Like it's about, the mental health side of things. It's how I evolved from it and how I'm able to tell these stories now, because I became something from it. And that is, to me, a success on its own. So, I can understand how to tell this story now, because I see it from all perspectives. It's not just a gloomy, dark perspective, right? Like, I see it from every perspective. And to come up with a tagline, if there's somebody you wouldn't know, help kill the silence, it comes from my heart, right? That means something, because a lot of people didn't know I was suffering like this. And a lot of people didn't know I was suffering through a silence. And those who did might have had an idea, but they don't know exactly why. And, I want to help people realize that, that the people who go through autophobia or are suffering from it, and maybe not literally autophobia, but perhaps you suffer from a degree of it, that you're not alone, and it's okay. And you got to keep going. And hopefully I stand as an example of somebody who has defeated the silence and realize that it's always going to be there, and it's not going to go away, but I've learned to live with it and try to make the best out of it every single day. And I'm still here. And I truly believe that I'm not supposed to be. No one told me I was going to be okay. Nobody told me that what I was going through was, going to be, that you're going to get through it. Literally nobody. I was kind of told the opposite. Oh, this is happening because of your choices, because you chose to be a filmmaker. This is what you get. That's the type of attitudes I had around me. It was never supportive. And I got through it. I had to be my own best friend. And so, you know, hopefully that helps. Hopefully the filmmaking community, people can hopefully, if you've gotten this far, that you related to it somehow. We all suffer in our own ways. And, that lets you know that it's okay. We filmmakers, as long as we stick together, we create communities and it's not go at each other's necks all the time, that will be all right. And we'll make great things. All right. Peace.